So good morning all of you. So in the last class we were discussing about the globe, leads and its pathological condition. In this class we will be discussing about the orbit, its anatomy and applied part. So that in the subsequent chapter we will discuss about the disease related to the orbit. So what type of structure is the orbit? It is the pear-shaped bony cavity. So what are the content of the orbit? So it contains a globe, extraocular muscles, nerves, fat, blood vessels and lacrimal gland. So it is situated between the anterior cranial fossa above and maxillary sinus below. So it tapered posteriorly towards the apex and optic canal. So it is a pear-shaped structure which contains different structures like globe, extraocular muscle, nerves, blood vessels and lacrimal gland. Volume of the adult orbit is 30 centimeter cube and orbital entrance is about 35 millimeter in the height and 45 millimeter wide, and depth of orbit varies from 40 to 45 millimeter from the orbital entrance to the orbital apex, and medial wall is approximately parallel. So this is the orbital cavity and this is a globe, and you see the medial walls are parallel and these lateral walls they make an angle of about 45 degree, and as a whole it makes an angle of about 23.5 degree with this globe. So these are important for the movement of the extraocular muscles. So medial orbital wall are approximately parallel and lateral wall lies at the angle of 45 degree to the medial wall. So lateral wall of the two orbits are at 90 degree to each other. So they are at 90 degree to each other. So bony orbit, it contains 7 bones: the frontal bone, zygomatic bone. So you see the frontal bone, zygomatic bone, maxillary bone. Over here is the maxilla, ethmoidal bone, something inside, and sphenoid bone. Sphenoid, you can see the laser wing of the sphenoid, and lacrimal bone and palatine bone. Now what is the roof like? The roof is formed from both the orbital plate of frontal bone. This is the orbital plate of frontal bone and laser wing of the sphenoid bone. The small part with the laser wing of the sphenoid bone. The frontal bone and the sphenoid bone. It slopes backward and downward from the orbital rim towards the apex and the optic canal. So there is a sloping of this orbital roof. What is the important landmark? Anterior lateral part of the roof has fossa for lacrimal gland and fovea for the trochlear of the superior oblique muscle is small depression close to the frontolateral suture about 4 millimeter from the orbital margin. So lacrimal gland and the superior oblique muscles. So frontoethmoidal sutures obliterated in the adult and lies between the orbital plate of frontal bone and laser wing of sphenoid and supraorbital notch. So relations are frontal bone, below periorbita, frontal knob, LPS, superior rectus, superior oblique, trochlear knob, and lacrimal gland. At the junction of the roof and lateral wall is a gap posteriorly called the superior orbital fissure. So roof is formed by the two bones. An important landmark is the lacrimal gland. So here is the fossa for the lacrimal gland. Orbital plate of frontal bone, fossa for the lacrimal gland. So roof is a very thin throughout its whole extent, except where formed by the lesser wing of sphenoid bone. So which is 3 millimeter thick, and periorbita easily peers away from its undersurface. So roof throughout the bone there is a covering called the periorbita. So it's a very thin bone. So the periorbita, it easily peers through this, and the shaft of objects introduced into the orbit through the upper lid penetrate the roof and damage the frontal lobe. So anything if it pass through the roof, then it can be easily penetrated and it can damage the frontal bone. So it is a thin bone. The roof is not perforated by the major nerves or blood vessels. It can easily be nibbled away in transfrontoorbital. So different walls of the bony orbits are roof, lateral wall, medial wall, floor, and they are formed by the different bones like roof, which we have discussed, lesser wing of the sphenoid and frontal bone. Like lateral is formed by the zygomatic bone, zygomatic process of frontal bone, greater wing of sphenoid bone, and orbital surface of the zygomatic bone. And medial wall, it is formed by the sphenoid bone, orbital plate of ethmoid bone, and a frontal process of the maxilla and lacrimal bone. So in this figure you can see it. And a floor of the orbit is formed by the orbital process of the palatine bone, orbital surface of maxillary bone, and a zygomatic bone. So medial wall, again here it is formed by the 4 bones. So 4 bones of the medial wall are maxillary frontal process of maxilla, lacrimal bone, orbital plate of ethmoid, and lesser wing of sphenoid bone. So lacrimal sac is situated in frontal process of maxilla and lacrimal bone. So we have different clinical appliances over here. The anterior part bears a lacrimal sac fossa, which is continuous inferiorly with the nasolacrimal canal. So boundaries of the lacrimal fossa are anterior lacrimal crest of maxilla and posterior lacrimal crest of lacrimal bone. So always remember the lacrimal sac, which is important in case of the DCR surgery or in case of watering, which we frequently come out in our clinical practice. It's very for you. You will ask where it is situated. So at least you have to utter the 2 bones, that is maxilla and the lacrimal bone. It is a thinnest wall, which is called the lacrimal papyraceae, which is a very thin wall, and it is commonest cause of orbital cellulitis, that is ethmoiditis, especially in case of children. So frequently eroded by the chronic inflammation, cyst, and neoplasm. So it can easily be fractured during the trauma, injuries, and ocular operations. So hemorrhage is troublesome due to the injury to ethmoidal vessels during the surgery along this wall. So though it is a very thinnest wall and it is easy to do the surgery. This is the bone which we break during the DCR surgery to do the dacrocystorhidostomy, and from there we make a bypass area to make a anastomosis between the lacrimal sac and the nasal mucosa. But there occurs a heavy hemorrhage because of the ethmoidal vessels. So that also we have to be careful, and sometimes due to stop the hemorrhage, we have to go for the packing. The anterior or posterior packing is also important. We have to put in mind. So lateral wall, it is the thickest and the strongest of the orbital wall, which is formed by the posteriorly by the greater wing of sphenoid bone and anteriorly by the zygomatic process of frontal bone and orbital plate of zygomatic bone. So sphenoid and zygomatic bone for the lateral wall, which is the strongest wall. The sphenoidal area is separated from the roof and the floor by the superior and inferior orbital fissure. So the zygomatic area merges with the floor and joins the roof at the frontozygomatic suture. So important landmark over here is lateral wall, which is a lateral orbital tubercle, which is called a Whitnard's tubercle. So it is a small elevations of the orbital margin of the zygomatic bone. So at this is the elevations, and at these elevations there is a some elevated point at this margin of the orbital margin. There is the elevated point. So it is called the Whitnard's tubercle. It lies approximately 2 millimeter below the 11 millimeter below the frontozygomatic suture. So what are the site of the attachment for this Whitnard's tubercle? Why it is important? It has got different attachment, that is cheek ligament of the lateral rectus muscle, suspensory ligament of the eyeball, lateral palpebral ligament, aponeurosis of the levator muscles, and Whitnard's ligament itself. So what are the relations of the lateral wall? So laterally, the lateral wall separates the orbit from the temporal fossa anteriorly and forms the medial cranial fossa posteriorly. So you can remember that laterally it is a temporal fossa as well as posteriorly there is a medial cranial fossa. So it is separated by the lateral wall, and medially it is related to the lateral rectus muscle, lacrimal nerves and vessels, zygomatic nerves, and the communications between the zygomatic and lacrimal nerves. So it is also a thickest and strongest wall, and it protects the posterior half of the eyeball, and hence palpation of the retrobulbar tubercle is easier from the lateral side. And zygomaticosphenoid suture is an important landmark in creating the flap in case of the Norlins operations. And once this flap is turned, there is a direct access to the superior lateral, inferior lateral, and retrobulbar quadrant of the orbit. Now, floor of the orbit, it is triangular, and it is shortest of all the walls, and there is no extensions to the orbital apex, and it ends at the pterygopalatine fossa. It's formed by the medially by the orbital surface of maxillary bone, and laterally by the orbital surface of zygomatic bone, and posteriorly by the palatine bone. So infraorbital grooves and canal transmits infraorbital arteries and maxillary division of the trigeminal nerve. Its relations are maxillary ear sinus and palatine ear sinuses below and above by the inferior rectus muscles, inferior oblique muscles, and nerve to the inferior oblique. So it is quite thin, and it's commonly involved in the blowout fractures. So it is easily invaded by the tumors of the maxillary antrum, and it can be approached by the inferior orbitotomy easily. So it is a commonly involved wall during the blowout fracture, means fracture with the wrist. So paranasal sinuses, the orbit is surrounded by the three sides by the paranasal sinuses. So the ethmoidal sinus runs along the medial orbital wall, divided into anterior, medial, and posterior ear cells, and by the highly variable systems of septa, and it is the only sinus to be fully pneumatized at the birth. So see different sinuses which are involved over here in the orbit. The maxillary sinus borders the orbital floor, and it is fully pneumatized by 2 to 4 years of age. Unlike the ethmoid sinus, it contains no supporting septa. The frontal sinus is not well developed or radiographically evidenced until about 6 years of life. So the frontal sinus lies deep to the superior orbital rim. The frontal sinus is the common site for the mucosal development. Base of the orbit is anterior, Open end of the orbit is referred to as the base, and it is quadrilateral in shape. Superior margin orbital arch of the frontal wall, and junction of the medial and lateral is the highest point of the arch. And here lies a supraorbital notch which transmits the supraorbital arteries and nerves. And it is 10 millimeter medial to the supratrochlear groove. So laterally, the strongest margin formed by the zygomatic process of frontal bone and zygomatic bone. Inferiorly, it's formed by the zygomatic bone and maxillary. 4 to 5 millimeter below the margin, there is an infraorbital foramen. So medially, it is formed by the anterior lacrimal crest on the frontal process of maxilla and posterior lacrimal crest on lacrimal bone. So the different margins, superior margins, lateral margin, inferior margin, and medial margin. So superior margin by frontal bone, lateral margin by zygomatic is the main bone, inferior margin by the two maxillary and zygomatic bone, and medial by the two bones, maxillary and lacrimal bone. So apex of the orbit, it is posterior end of the orbit is the apex of the orbit. 4 orbital wall converges here. It has got 2 orifice, optic canal and superior orbital fissure. So optic canal and superior orbital fissure. Optic canal, it connects the orbit to the medial cranial fossa. It connects the orbit, optic canal, it connects the orbit to the medial cranial fossa, and it's located at the lesser wing of the sphenoid bone. And normally adult dimension of the optic canal, which is attained by the age of 4 to 5 years, and its average length is 8 to 10 millimeter. And the orbital end of the canal in the optic foramen, which measures about less than 6.5 millimeter in diameter. So it transmits the optic nerve with its meninges of the ophthalmic artery and sympathetic nerve. So this anatomical landmark, the size is very important radiographically during any growth or in the meninges. So we initially this size is also seen. Tumors such as optic nerve glioma and meningioma may lead to unilateral enlargement of the optic canal. Enlargement of the canal can also occur in sarcoidosis, neurofibroma, arachnoidal cyst, and chronic hydrocephalus. So blunt trauma can cause the optic canal fracture. So this size is very important in case of radiographically in case of optic canal. In different disease condition, we see this size. So even in the MCQ, you can be asked the size of the optic canal. So different transmit optic nerve and its meninges, ophthalmic artery and sympathetic nerve passes through it. Superior orbital fissures, it connects the medial cranial fossa and orbital cavity. So it is bounded by greater and lesser wing of sphenoid. It lies between the roof and lateral wall of the orbit, and it's a coma-shaped, wider at the medial end, lateral to the optic foramen at the orbital apex. It is divided into upper, middle, and lower part by the common tendinous ring. So this is it's a coma-shaped structure, the superior orbital fissure. So different structure pass through it. So when we discuss the nerve, then we will discuss regarding it. Structure passing through the superior orbital fissures is so upper, middle, and lower. Upper lacrimal nerve, frontal, trochlear, superior ophthalmic vein, and recurrent branch of ophthalmic artery. And medial part is upper and lower division of the oculomotor nerve, mesociliary and abducens nerve, and lower part by inferior ophthalmic artery. So radiographic enlargement of the superior orbital fissures may accompany pathological process such as aneurysm, meningioma, chondroma, pituitary adenoma, or tumors of the orbital apex. This is also very important landmark to see these common presentations. When idiopathic inflammatory preferentially involve the superior orbital fissure, then Tonoza-Hunt syndrome, which is a painful ophthalmoplegia result. So in case of Tonoza-Hunt syndrome, which we see the diplopia, the painful movement of the eyeball. So in this condition, if we do the MRI, we can see the enlargement of the superior orbital fissure. Similarly, the inferior orbital fissure lies just below the superior orbital fissures between the lateral wall and floor of the orbit, providing the access to the pterygopalatine and inferior temporal fossa. So it is close to the foramen rotundum and pterygoid canal. So it transmits infraorbital and zygomatic branch of mandibular divisions of trigeminal nerve, which is a mandibular division of the trigeminal nerves, and the orbital nerve from the pterygopalatine ganglia and the infraorbital vein, inferior ophthalmic vein, and it also connects veins connected to the pterygoid plexus before draining into the cavernous sinus. So inferior orbital fissure. So these are the different orbital apeges and its locations and different content which are summarized in the table. So globe, which we have discussed in the earlier class also, it is located in the anterior orbit, situated slightly superiorly and laterally in the orbit. So it is supported in the orbit by the Lockwood ligament. And in adult, it is anterior posterior diameter is 24 millimeter, vertical is 23, and horizontal is 23.5 millimeter. Periorbita, it is applied to the inner surface of the periosteum, and it is multiple layer of the orbital connective tissues that are continuous with the transorbital septal system. And it's generally loosely attached underlying the orbital tissue, except that this periorbita is covering, it's a orbital connective tissues which is covering the periosteum, and it's tightly adhered other part, except some part it is loosely attached, like orbital margin, superior orbital fissure, inferior orbital fissure, optic foramen, lacrimal fossas, and sutures, so that easily the other structure can transmit through this. At the apex of the orbit, it fuses with the dura of the optic nerve. Anteriorly, it is continuous with the orbital septum and periosteum of the facial bones. It's taken at the apex to form the common tendinous ring of Jean, and it is innervated by the trigeminal nerve, and it's very sensitive. So loose attachment of the periorbita to the bones, which permits the accumulations of blood and pus. So any type of trauma or anything can easily accumulate in that space. So in the exenterations, so these are the destructive surgery exenterations, where whole the eyeball is involved along with the lymph nodes and all, and when we cannot save the eyeball, then we do exenterations. There are other type of the destructive surgeries like evisceration, inoculation. So eviscerations, only the content are we just take out the content of the eyeball. In case of inoculations, we take out the content along with the optic nerves, and all the 3 layers are removed. And in case of exenterations, whole the adenexas are also removed with the lymph nodes. And periorbita can be easily separated except at the site of form attachment, since it is fused with the durameter at the margins of the optic canal and superior orbital fissures. Trauma or surgery in this area may be complicated by CSF leakage. So it's quite dangerous. And muscles of the or ocular motility Orbital fascia, it is, there are three parts of the orbital fascia: Tenon's fascia, muscular fascia covering the extraocular muscle, and check ligament of the extraocular muscles. So fascia bulbi, which is also called the Tenon's capsule, this is a thin fiber sheet which envelopes the globes from the limbus to the optic disc. So fascia bulbi or Tenon's capsule, it's a covering sheet. Inner surface lies in close contact with sclera, and outer surface is contact with the orbital fat with subconjunctival tissues with which it merges near the limbus. And it is separated from the sclera by the episcleral space called Tenon's space. And it is thickest in the area of the equator of the globe, and its connections between the Tenon's capsules and periorbital tissue helps suspends the globe in the orbit. So Tenon's capsule, it is the covering of the globe, and it supports the eyeball within the orbital cavity. It permits the action of the extrinsic muscles to produce the eye movement, and in enucleations of the eyeball, the facial sheath should be preserved to serves as the socket for prosthesis. So we will not remove this sheath so that we can put one marble or any prosthetic type inside it so that the shape of the eyeball is preserved. Check ligament of the extraocular muscles. Orbital fat, which is most of the orbital cavity is occupied by the orbital fat, so extends from the optic knob to the orbital wall and from the apex of the orbit to the orbital periorbital. It's divided into intraconal fat and extraconal fat. So it helps for the locations of the mass in the CT scan. Pre-aponeurotic fat, which is an important landmark for the surgeons for identifying the eyelid retractors. So orbital fat, it maintains a cushion-like effect to support the globe and other orbital structure. So as the facial layer in the orbit is thin with the age, the orbital fat sometimes prolapse through the weakened orbital septum in the lid. So since the medial and central fat of the lower lid are separated by the inferior oblique muscles, it may be injured while excising the fat during the blepharoplasty. Orbital septum, which we have already discussed about this in the lid also, the 7 structures of the lid. So it's a thin and it's formed by the multi-layer fibrous tissues which passes inwards from the periorbital to the fascia bulbi. So its origin is arcus marginalis, and it's also attached both anteriorly and posteriorly to the lacrimal crest, superiorly fuses with the levator-aponeurosis, and inferiorly to the capsulopalpable fascia. So it's covering anteriorly by the preceptor orbicularis oculi muscles, and it acts as a physical barrier against the pathogens and maintains a normal posterior positions of the orbital fat pad. So it is a very important landmark. So any pathogens which passes through this orbital septum is called the orbital cellulitis, and any pathogens which is anterior to the septum is a preseptal cellulitis. So it is landmark for the intraocular and extraocular spread of the infections. So there are the surgical spaces of the orbit: subperiosteal, intraconal, extraconal, subtenon, and sometimes it is also added that subarachnoid space is also included over here. So 4 or 5 spaces. So subperiosteal space, it is a potential space between the orbital bone and periorbita, limiting anteriorly by the strong adhesions of periorbita to the orbital rim. Subperiosteal means beyond the periosteum. So dermoid cyst, epidermoid cyst, mucocele, subperiosteal abscess, myeloma. So these are commonly seen over here, and it is very useful to see with the plain X-ray. Intraconal space. So it's called the muscular cone or posterior to the retrobulbar space. So these are the space, and it is bounded anteriorly by the Tenon's capsule and peripherally by the extraocular rectus muscle. So tumors in this space produces the axial proptosis. So like cavernous hemangioma, solitary neurofibroma, optic nerve glioma, AB malformation. So proptosis means protrusions of the eyeball beyond the orbital margin or rim. Extraconal, so outside the cone. So it's bounded periphery by the periorbita and internally by the forecti muscle with their intermuscular septum and anteriorly by the orbital septum. So it contains a lacrimal gland, oblique muscles, trochlear, extraconal fat, superior and inferior ophthalmic vein and knob, and posteriorly it merges with the central space. So common tumors are lymphoma, capillary hemangioma, intrinsic muscles of the lacrimal gland, pseudotumors, dermoid cyst, and rhabdomyosarcoma. So it causes a non-axial proptosis or eccentric proptosis. Subtenon space, it is a potential space between the eyeball, between the sclera and the Tenon's capsule. So space may be enlarged with the fluid in posterior scleritis or ear following the trauma. So pus collected in this space is drained by the incisions of the Tenon's capsule. So arterial supply is with the internal carotid artery and external carotid artery. So ophthalmic artery, which is internal carotid artery branch, and external carotid, internal maxillary, facial, arises from the medial side of internal carotid, in medial to the anterior clinoid process and inferior to the optic nerve at its origin, and it's divided into intracranial, intracanalicular, and intraorbital part. So you have to practice this figure. It will be easy for you. This is a lead which we have discussed. And venous drainage posteriorly through the ophthalmic vein into the cavernous sinus and inferiorly to the pterygoid plexus through the inferior ophthalmic orbital vein and anteriorly by the communicating of the angular vein into the facial system. So angular vein lies 8 millimeter from the medial canthus, and it's important landmark during the lacrimal sac surgery where we will keep the incision. So it's 8 millimeter. So usually we avoid that 8 millimeter and we keep the incision at 4 to 5 millimeter from the medial canthus or beyond the 8 millimeter, that is 11 to 12 millimeter. So cavernous sinus, it is a large venous space situated in the medial cranial fossa, one on each side of the body of the sphenoid bone. So anteriorly, it extends up to the medial end of superior orbital fissure and posteriorly to the apex of petrous part of temporal bone. So this is very important landmark, cavernous sinus. So you have to know how to draw and its tributaries. Superior ophthalmic vein, branch of inferior ophthalmic vein, central vein of retina. So these are the this is the cavernous sinus, one on each side, and its drainage, different tributaries. So in the Parson also there is a easy one and nice picture, and even in Kurana also I think there is the easy one picture. So if you will practice that. So orbital knobs, optic knobs, oculomotor knob, trochlear knob, abducent knob, so trigeminal knob. So we will discuss about this in the neuro-ophthalm. Optic knob, which covers by meninges and CSF, communicate freely with the fluid bathing to the midbrain. It expands, suddenly expands, can cause a respiratory arrest following the retrobulbar injection. So When we give a block, it is also very important. Intracanalicular part is immobile at the dura seat, is fused to the periosteum of the optic canal. So sometimes during the trauma, if there is a damage at that part, and if that part lost arterial supply, patient can have the optic atrophy, resulting in a complete loss of vision. This anatomical arrangement makes it vulnerable to damage from the blunt trauma. So these are the very important part which I have highlighted. So we will discuss about this nerve in the neuro. Ciliary ganglia, which you will miss to read and you will not think it is important. This is an important question by the examiners, external, which will be asked to you in exam. And it is usually 1 centimeter in front of the annulus of the gene. And this figure, if you remember, it will be, I think, is where it is situated. Lateral side of the ophthalmic artery between the optic nerve and lateral rectus muscle, and it receives the 3 roots: long sensory root, a short motor root, and a sympathetic root comes from the plexus around the internal carotid artery. So long sensory root, it contains the sensory fibers from the cornea, iris, and ciliary body. The short motor roots through the divisions of the third nerve, and sympathetic root through the superior orbital fissures within the tendinous ring. So this is the orbit anatomy and a few important landmark and a few pathological conditions. Nerve I will not discuss because in again neuro-ophthalm section it will be discussed. So now there is a number of the chapters covered in the eye, so it will be difficult for you to later on if you will read. So you start reading it. In the next class, what I will discuss is I have to discuss the lacrocystitis and what